Well, hello everybody, Newbornkilik here, welcoming you back to another awesome Zelda-related video. Today, we're going to be starting a series called How Many Hearts? If you watched one of my previous videos about how many hearts an Iron Knuckle has, or kind of the conversions of hearts versus enemy health pools, how many hearts they may have, then you would know that I kind of hinted at that I wanted to take a look at some of the different temples, and I figured what better place to start with than the first real temple in the game. Well, at least if you're an adult. Speaking of which, I wanted to issue myself a bit of a different challenge in trying to complete the forest temple as a child, so we'll be using some different glitches in the gameplay to accomplish this goal. The way that I'll be finding all of these enemy health values will be using most likely the boomerang, and if I can't use the boomerang for whatever reason on the enemy, then I want to be using a standard vertical or horizontal sword slash. They both do the same amount of damage. So first things first, as we enter the forest temple, we are met by the first pair of enemies that we will fight in the area. Of course, I'm talking about the Wolfos. So the Wolfos have a weak point around their backside. Their tails is their weak point, and it basically makes it so that anything will kill them, except for maybe the weakest hit in the game. I don't actually know. I usually just do a backflip and then a quick jump slash. Even with the Kokiri sword, that'll take them out. But disregarding their weakness, they take 8 hits with the Kokiri sword. And if you watched the last video, which is important by the way, I may recommend doing that, but we know from that video that the Kokiri sword does half a heart worth of damage, and it takes 8 hits to kill a Wolfos without exploiting its weakness, of course. So that would mean that the Wolfos has 4 hearts, not accounting for weaknesses, of course. An interesting little tidbit about the Wolfos is that they're one of the few enemies in the game that actually have a guarding animation. One of the few common enemies, of course. So it's just kind of interesting that they are defensively minded, not through natural armor, but through actual actions of guarding themselves. Let me just bash my hand on the desk. The desk guarded. It's fine. It's really fine. Upon defeating the 2 Wolfos and entering the first door, we find ourselves face to face with a familiar enemy. Someone that we've been battling from our childhood, a standard Skulltula. Now, armored on the front, these bad boys are actually a nightmare, okay? And imagine this thing in real life. You just die of fright. This isn't okay. But yeah, Skulltulas are immune to most damage from the front. Basically anything that isn't a piercing weapon. Your sword doesn't work. Hook shots work, bows work, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, bows work. Alternately, you can just wait for them to, for some reason, expose their backside. I don't know why they decided to do this. Hit them twice with the Kokiri sword, leaving them with 1 heart of health. Upon entering the main chamber of the forest temple, we find ourselves face to face with 4 very, very mad spirits. For whatever reason, they're just upset. Don't know why, but they decide to steal fire over it. So, I mean, you have to be pretty upset when you're stealing fire. But we'll get back to these 4 spirits in just a little bit. For now, let's head straight through to the open door on the other side. Well, we will be met with a blue bubble. Now, while this enemy does have its signature blue fire around it, protecting it from most forms of damage, except for blunt force trauma to the face with a shield bash, let's go! Yes. It has 2 hearts worth of damage, as we can see pretty easily. Passing through the newly cleared corridor, we are met by 2 Stalfos. The first time we've ever seen this enemy, they have a shield blocking all damage from the front as long as they are guarding, providing they're not mid putting it down and bringing it back up animation. Little tip for you, they can be hit whenever they do that little... They can be hit then, and if you're really, really good at timing things out, you can cheese the whole fight. These bad boys have plenty of attacks and the special property that if one of them goes down and is on the ground kind of in their bone state for too long, he will actually reform himself. You have to defeat both of them at the well, not the exact same time. That would be insanity, but, you know, pretty similar timing in order to get them both to just die and stay dead. Which is interesting that it only happens with this enemy. I can't think of another enemy that happens with in Ocarina of Time, so it's kind of not a very important mechanic to introduce halfway through the game. That's a little weird. I guess they technically use it in Ganon's castle as well, but that's about it. With the boomerang in hand and Kokiri sword in the rib cage of the enemy, we can find that the Stalfos each have 5 hearts. Fun fact, this makes it really, really difficult to destroy both Stalfos before the first one regenerates. So you've probably noticed by now, I have a lot of keys. Well, I meant to give myself maximum hearts, and all the items and stuff just to get to this point as a child, basically. And I guess I gave myself a lot of keys, too. What are you gonna do? I'm gonna continue, that's what I'm gonna do. As we defeat the two Stalfos, we will notice that a chest has suddenly appeared in the room via some sort of magic. And in this chest, we'll find ourselves a small key. So, this will allow us entry into the next room. But we're going to bypass that for just a little bit, as we do have some business in the Courtyard at the moment. Now, luckily, the Courtyard can be accessed through this little eye switch here, which Child Link can shoot with his slingshot, no problem. This was one of the things I was worried about, not being able to hit this switch, but I know a workaround to completely bypass needing to hit that switch anyway, so it wasn't really that big of a concern in the first place. Mostly that idea just kind of came out of ignorance. I wasn't sure if the switches that were meant for the bow and the slingshot were coded differently, or if you just had to hit them with a projectile. And thus we find ourselves in a courtyard face to face with a big Deku Baba. Now, the big Deku Baba is just a larger version of what we saw in the Great Deku Tree. Nothing too special about it. However, it does seem to lack the weakness that you can hit it in the stem and it dies in one hit. That apparently is just a thing that happens with the Deku Baba, but it's only sometimes, and we'll get into that later because there's one in this temple. But also sometimes these guys just tank hits like crazy, and I don't know why this happened. Overall, these enemies will have 2 hearts, 4 hits with the sword. Oh, and that does count for both the stem and the head of the plant, so it doesn't matter which one you're hitting, it has 2 hearts. And I guess it's time to quickly move on to the Octorok, because he's been bothering me for this entire time I've been trying to test this Deku Baba, because I don't know how to stop and just go deal with it. But they die in one hit to basically anything. They're pathetic, but annoying nonetheless. I should clarify, there are some enemies that seem to be one-hit KO enemies. These are enemies that basically no matter what you hit them with, they're gonna die in one hit. A good example of these would be the Guai, if I'm saying that correctly, and the Keese and the Octorok. You can even hit them with the boomerang, they die to the boomerang. Nothing dies to the boomerang except a one-hit KO enemy. It's pretty upsetting, actually. I bumped my desk again. I need to move this desk out of the way, obviously. Anyway, now that we've cleaned out this side of the courtyard, let's head over to the other side of the courtyard. We simply have to play the Song of Time to get there, but wait. Okay, that's a little weird. But anyway, that's fine. Let's just head on in. Probably just a problem with me being a kid in here. I don't actually know why this is the case or why this is here, but it is, and we just have to deal with it. Luckily, it's easy because it's not in our way at all. So we walk right through the door, and we are immediately met with another large Deku Baba, dispatched super easy, along with another rather annoying Octorok, but disregarding that, not a big deal. We're gonna head over to the right here, and our hero will find himself a Skulltula. Now, I thought these were Skulltulas, and the big ones were big Skulltulas? I guess not. Maybe it changes between game. Maybe I'm an idiot. Maybe I should stop letting child me dictate what I think in life. They're another one of those very, very special one-hit KO enemies that die to the boomerang. Not even the gold Skulltulas die in one hit to the boomerang. They take 2 hits to the boomerang, but we're not going to cover those in this video just yet because they're everywhere, and there may be a temple that needs them a little more than the forest temple does. There are actually a lot of unique enemies in the forest temple. At least this is the first time you would notice them. Climbing up the vine and heading up, we are met with another blue bubble, dispatched just as easily as the first, and this room will grant us the map. Useful. Now we have the map. So that's good. Well, I guess I had the map before, but now we have 2 maps. After we obtain our second map, one for each hand, we can double map it in the forest temple. It's really handy, to be honest with you, but that's beside the point. Exiting that door right there, we find ourselves face to face with a vicious, vicious Deku Baba. It's not that big of a deal, but it is a bit inconsistent, and here's why. Usually, if you stun it with a Deku Nut, or the boomerang in this case, and slice it in the stem, it just dies. That's just it. You're cutting it off at the stem. This is a mechanic that I thought was in the large Deku Baba as well, but in my testing, at least with Child Link, it doesn't seem to be for whatever reason. So basically what we're looking at is a 2 times weakness on the stem and if you hit the head of the Deku Baba, you're going to be taking 2 hits, so it'll have 1 full heart, is how it's supposed to work. But it's inconsistent. Sometimes when you hit the stem, you'll get like a weird second hitbox, and it maybe counts as a hitbox to the head and doesn't end up doing the full damage. I'm not entirely sure exactly what the problem is. It almost seems like there's a weak spot on Link's sword, but I don't know. I don't have all the answers, okay? But yes, the Deku Baba will have just a single heart. Thank you so much for checking out part 1 on the analysis of the Forest Temple. This has ended up being a lot larger of a project than I had maybe anticipated, so thank you so much for your patience. Part 2 will be out very shortly. I'm hoping for about a week from now, so next week, check back, hit that bell, and you will be aware of when the video is released. And hey, if you happen to be watching this in the future, it's probably out already, so definitely go check that out. Anyway, with that, I'm Newbornkilik, and I will see you in the next one. I'm out.